plasma bolts slammed into the prefab walls, vaporizing metal and flesh alike as the remote farming colony of New Gaia burned under the onslaught of the Jem'Hadar betrayers. Ricky Crawford, a battle-hardened ex-Marine turned farmhand, shoved a fresh power cell into his rifle and peeked over the barricade of rubble and wrecked shuttles. Overhead, the wedge-shaped silhouettes of Jem'Hadar warships hung in the smoke-choked sky, unleashing salvo after salvo of destruction on the once peaceful settlement. "Fall back to the shelters," Ricky yelled to the surviving colonists, his voice nearly drowned out by the roar of explosions and whine of incoming dropships. He sprinted from cover to cover, plasma bolts sizzling past his head, and led the terrified farmers toward the hidden cave system in the mountains. Among them were his best friend Jake Thompson and Jake's wife Maria, both caked in soot and blood. Inside the caves, a ragtag group of rebel fighters manned a secret command post. Ricky and the others gathered around a flickering holomap as reports flooded in from across the sector. New Avalon destroyed, Byzantium in flames, Arcadia overrun. The Jem'Hadar had turned on their human allies without warning or mercy, and now the blood of innocents flowed among the stars. Back on Earth, the United Earth Federation reeled from the shocking betrayal. The president stood before a silent Congress, her face grim as the holoscreens played looping footage of burning colonies and Jem'Hadar atrocities. "The Jem'Hadar have forgotten the bonds of friendship and alliance that once united us," she declared, her voice rising with righteous anger. "But we have not forgotten how to fight." The chamber erupted in thunderous applause as she unveiled the existence of a mighty war fleet built in secret to counter just such a treachery. Marshalling every ship and soldier, the United Earth Federation prepared to bring the full might of human wrath crashing down upon the Jem'Hadar Empire. The first blows of a terrible war had been struck, and now the fate of worlds hung in the balance. On distant New Gaia, Ricky Crawford and his band of survivors could only hope that the retribution of Earth would reach them before the Jem'Hadar claimed their lives. The battle for humanity's future amongst the stars had begun. The acrid stench of burning metal and charred flesh hung thick in the air as Ricky Crawford led the bedraggled group of survivors deeper into the mountain caves. Flickering lamps cast eerie shadows on the rough-hewn walls, illuminating haggard faces etched with fear and exhaustion. Ricky's grip tightened on his rifle as strange voices echoed from up ahead. He signaled for the others to stay back and edged forward, ready for anything. Around the next bend, Ricky found himself staring down the barrels of a dozen high-powered rifles. Hard-bitten men and women in scorched and tattered UEF Marine uniforms crouched behind makeshift barricades, their eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Hold your fire!" barked a grizzled man with captain's bars on his collar. "State your identity and purpose." Ricky slowly lowered his weapon. Ricky Crawford, New Gaia Colonial Militia. We're survivors from the fields, looking for shelter. The Marine captain scrutinized Ricky for a long moment before nodding curtly. "Captain Marcus Hawkins, UEF Marines 14th Battalion. We escaped the Jem'Hadar raid on our garrison. Been hitting the bastards from the mountains ever since." Ricky felt a surge of relief and no small measure of respect. He holstered his rifle and extended a calloused hand. "Damn good to see some friendly faces, Captain. Thought those butchers got everyone in uniform." Marcus shook Ricky's hand with a bone-crushing grip. "Not all of us, and we don't plan on letting them finish the job." As the other survivors filed into the rebel sanctuary, Ricky and Marcus swapped stories of close calls and desperate stands against the marauding Jem'Hadar. A bond forged quickly between the two men, tempered by shared loss and a grim tenacity to see their homes liberated. Over the next days and weeks, grim reports filtered into the mountain hideout from the few surviving resistance cells scattered across New Gaia's rugged terrain. The Jem'Hadar had swiftly crushed all organized opposition and set about systematically strip-mining the colony's resources to feed their ravenous war machine. Thousands of colonists were herded into slave labor camps, toiling under the cruel overseer's lash to build sprawling fortifications for the occupiers. The already dim hope for rescue or relief faded as the Jem'Hadar tightened their stranglehold on New Gaia. In the command center hewn from the mountain's rock, Ricky and Marcus pored over flickering holomaps, searching for any weakness in the Jem'Hadar's armor. Analysts had identified critical links in the invaders' supply chain: convoys moving precious ores from the mining camps, remote communications relays, and isolated barracks full of resting troops. Ricky stabbed a finger at a glowing dot. There, that's our play. Cut their supply line, hit their comms, keep them scrambling. Marcus nodded grimly. Guerrilla strikes, just like in recon training. We'll need to scrounge up explosives, but we've got people who know the terrain. Could work. Ricky allowed himself a mirthless smile. It wasn't much, but it was a start. He looked around at the hollow-cheeked fighters, sharpening blades and cleaning rifles. They didn't have numbers or firepower. What they did have was audacity, grit, and a bone-deep thirst for payback. And if Ricky had anything to say about it, the Jem'Hadar would soon learn just how much havoc a few pissed-off humans could wreak. He and Marcus began to draw up plans for a campaign of bloody resistance against New Gaia's alien overlords. There would be no surrender, no quarter. The fight for humanity's future had come to this remote colony, and Ricky intended to make the most of it. Out under the smoke-shrouded sky, the Jem'Hadar fortified their conquest, oblivious to the simmering wrath they had unleashed. In mountain caves and forest hideouts, ragtag bands of human fighters prepared to remind the galaxy of their species' invincible willpower to survive and drive to forge their own destiny among the stars, no matter the odds or costs. The mountain hideout erupted into a frenzy of activity as Ricky burst into the command center, his face flushed with excitement. "We've got contact!" he shouted, waving a crackling comm unit. "UEF fleet's mobilizing. They're coming for us!" Marcus Hawkins leapt to his feet, hope flaring in his eyes for the first time in weeks. "Let me hear it," he demanded, snatching the device. Through the static, a stern voice cut through. "This is Admiral Nolan Garrett of the United Earth Federation. To all resistance forces on New Gaia, we are en route. Hold fast. Liberation is coming." A cheer rose from the assembled fighters, but Ricky and Marcus exchanged knowing looks. The real work was just beginning. Over the next days, encrypted transmissions flew back and forth between the rebel base and Admiral Garrett's flagship. Ricky and his team provided detailed intelligence on Jem'Hadar troop movements, weapon emplacements, and supply lines. In return, Garrett shared his developing strategy for surgical strikes against key enemy installations. "We hit these targets," Garrett's holographic image explained, gesturing to glowing points on a 3D map. "And we cripple their ability to coordinate a defense when our main force arrives." Ricky nodded, studying the terrain. "My people know those areas inside and out, Admiral. We can guide your strike teams in." As plans solidified on New Gaia, light years away on the Jem'Hadar homeworld, a very different gathering was taking place. Emperor Kalar's throne room pulsed with an oppressive crimson glow as he addressed his assembled military leaders. "New Gaia persists in defying us," Kalar snarled, his scaled face contorting with rage. "This cannot stand! General Zarek!" A towering Jem'Hadar warrior stepped forward, his eyes glinting with nearly unleashed bloodlust. "My emperor? Take personal command of the occupation. Crush these human vermin. Leave no trace of their existence." Zarek's lips curled into a vicious smile. "It will be done, Exalted One. I depart at once with our mightiest war fleet. New Gaia's rebels will choke on their own ashes." Back on the beleaguered colony, Commander Krax was growing desperate. Rebel strikes had intensified, emboldening the populace. In response, he initiated a campaign of terror, rounding up civilians for public executions. Ricky watched from concealment as a group of bloodied prisoners were marched into the town square. His fists clenched as he recognized faces, neighbors, friends. Among them was a shock of familiar red hair. "Marcus," he hissed into his comm, "your brother's down there." A sharp intake of breath, then, "Understood. Initiating rescue op. All teams, go hot." What followed was a symphony of coordinated violence. Snipers took out Jem'Hadar guards with pinpoint shots. Shaped charges blew holes in the prefab walls, disorienting the alien soldiers. Ricky led the charge, his rifle spitting plasma as he cut a path to the prisoners. "Ryan," Marcus shouted, sprinting to his younger brother and cutting his bonds. "Can you walk?" The battered Marine nodded grimly. "Damn right I can. Let's kill these bastards." As the rescued civilians were hustled to safety, Ricky's team laid down covering fire. They melted back into the ruined outskirts of the settlement, leaving chaos in their wake. Later, as the liberated prisoners were treated in the rebel medbay, Admiral Garrett's hologram flickered to life with urgent news. "We've detected a massive energy signature in orbit," he reported, his face grave. "Our analysts believe it's some kind of superweapon, capable of destroying entire planets. We need eyes on that installation, Crawford. Without schematics, we're flying blind." Ricky exchanged glances with Marcus and Ryan. "Consider it done, Admiral. We'll get you those plans, or die trying." As the rebel team geared up for their most dangerous mission yet, they were unaware that General Zarek's reinforcement fleet had just entered the system. The true test of human resilience on New Gaia was about to begin. The true test of human resilience on New Gaia was about to unfold in ways Ricky Crawford could never have imagined. Months later, Ricky found himself aboard the UEF Dauntless, Admiral Garrett's new flagship. The bridge thrummed with nervous energy as the task force prepared to launch another raid on Jem'Hadar territory. "Status report," Garrett barked, his weathered face illuminated by holographic displays. "All ships report ready, sir," his XO replied. "Stealth systems engaged." Garrett nodded grimly. "Execute jump sequence." Stars blurred into streaks as the fleet tore through subspace. Ricky gripped a nearby console, still unaccustomed to the disorientation of faster-than-light travel. As reality snapped back into focus, alarms blared. "Multiple contacts," the sensor officer shouted. "Jem'Hadar vessels decloaking on all sides." Garrett's eyes widened. "It's a trap," he breathed. "Evasive maneuvers. All ships, return fire." The bridge rocked as enemy fire slammed into the Dauntless's shields. Ricky steadied himself, watching in horror as Jem'Hadar ships emerged from stealth positions, catching the task force in a deadly crossfire. "Admiral," Ricky shouted over the din of battle, "we need to get out of here." Garrett's eyes sharp as he assessed the tactical display. "Agreed. All ships fighting retreat. We're punching out of this kill box." The next hours were a blur of explosions, near misses, and the sickening lurch of emergency maneuvers. When they finally limped back to Federation space, the task force was battered and bloodied. In the aftermath, Ricky found himself summoned to a secure briefing room. Admiral Garrett paced, his face drawn with exhaustion and nearly unleashed fury. "Major Crawford," he said, "I have a mission for you. We've received intel from a Jem'Hadar defector, claims to have information on their new superweapon." Ricky's eyebrows shot up. "A defector, sir? Can we trust them?" Garrett's lips thinned. "We don't have much choice. This planet killer they're building, it could turn the tide of the war. I need your team to make contact and verify the intel." Ricky nodded, his mind already racing through tactical scenarios. "Where's the rendezvous?" "Karnath," Garrett replied, pulling up a holo map of a barren ice world. "You'll be taking a stealth insertion craft. Your new protege, Lieutenant Connors, will be joining you." As Ricky left to brief his team, he couldn't shake a sense of unease. This mission had all the makings of another trap. But if there was even a chance of gaining an edge against the Jem'Hadar, they had to take it. Days later, Ricky's commandos huddled in the frozen wastes of Karnath, their white camouflaged armor barely visible against the driving snow. Lieutenant Connors crouched beside him, eyes scanning the horizon through high-powered binoculars. "Movement at 2 o'clock, Connors whispered. "Jem'Hadar patrol." Ricky tensed, raising a hand to signal the team. They held perfectly still as the alien warriors passed within meters of their position. Once clear, they continued their grueling trek toward the abandoned mining facility, serving as the rendezvous point. As they approached the dilapidated structure, the hairs on the back of Ricky's neck stood up. Something felt off. "Connors, take point," he ordered. "Everyone else, watch our 6. They entered the facility, weapons at the ready. Suddenly, plasma bolts sizzled through the air. Jem'Hadar materialized from concealed positions, their battle cries echoing off metal walls. "It's an ambush," Ricky roared. "Take cover!" The commandos reacted instantly, diving behind machinery and returning fire. The close quarters turned the firefight into a chaotic melee. Ricky saw one of his men go down, then another. They were outnumbered and outgunned. Just as despair began to set in, a new voice cut through the din. "Cease fire! We are not your enemies!" A towering Jem'Hadar stepped into view, hands raised. "I am Trokgar. We have much to discuss, humans." Ricky kept his weapon trained on the alien, heart pounding. "Prove it," he snarled. Trokgar's eyes narrowed. "The planet killer. I can tell you how to destroy it." Trokgar's eyes gleamed with a mix of purpose and fear. "The planet killer. I can tell you how to destroy it." Ricky lowered his weapon slightly, but kept it trained on the Jem'Hadar defector. "Start talking." Over the next hour, Trokgar unveiled a wealth of intelligence on the Nigean superweapon. Ricky's team recorded every detail, from schematics to security protocols. When they finally emerged from the frozen wasteland of Karnath, they carried with them the key to humanity's survival. Back aboard the Dauntless, Admiral Garrett pored over the intel. His face was grim as he addressed the assembled war council. "Gentlemen, we have one shot at this. The planet killer must be neutralized before it can threaten Earth." Holographic displays flickered to life, showcasing the massive shipyard hidden within the Nakara Nebula. Garrett's finger traced the path of their planned infiltration. "Major Crawford, you and Omega Force will penetrate the facility, posing as repair crews. Your objective? Plant demolition charges at these critical junctures." Ricky studied the schematics, committing each target to memory. "Understood, sir. When do we deploy?" 600 hours. Prepare your team." In the pre-mission darkness, Ricky addressed his commandos. Each face was a mask of focus and awe-inspiring tension. "This is it, Omega. No room for error. We go in quiet, we plant the charges, we get out. For Earth." The stealth shuttle slipped through the nebula's swirling gases, a ghost among the stars. As they approached the massive shipyard, Ricky's breath caught in his throat. The half-constructed planet killer loomed before them, a colossus of metal and malice. "Docking procedure initiated," the pilot's voice crackled over the comm. "Good hunting, Omega." Ricky led his team through the airlock, their disguises holding up under cursory inspection. They split into pre-assigned groups, each making their way to designated sabotage points. Hours passed in a haze of sweat and concentration as they rigged the explosives. Just as Ricky was attaching the final detonator, alarms blared throughout the ship. "Intruder alert! All security forces to Sector 7. "Omega, abort subtlety!" Ricky barked into his comm. "Get to the extraction point now!" Plasma bolts sizzled past his head as he sprinted through twisting corridors. The air filled with the acrid stench of ozone and the screams of the wounded. Ricky's team fought their way meter by bloody meter towards their rendezvous. A massive Nigean warrior stepped into their path, energy blade humming with lethal intent. "You will go no further, humans," he snarled. "Warlord Zyrax's," one of Ricky's men whispered in awe and terror. Ricky didn't hesitate. He emptied his clip into the Nijan's chest, the high-powered rounds barely slowing the behemoth. Zyraxes roared and charged, blade slicing through the air. Time seemed to slow as Ricky ducked under the swing, feeling the heat of the energy weapon pass inches from his scalp. He rolled, came up firing, and watched with grim satisfaction as Zyraxes stumbled. "Move!" Ricky shouted to his team. They raced past the wounded warlord, knowing every second counted. They burst onto the hangar deck just as Admiral Garrett's fleet dropped out of warp. A hurricane of fire erupted between the Federation ships and the Nigean defenders. "Omega Force, this is Dauntless Actual." Garrett's voice crackled over the comm. "Your window is closing fast. Status on the package?" Ricky dove behind a stack of crates as enemy fire peppered their position. "Charges set, Admiral! Awaiting your command!" "Detonate now, Colonel. We'll be there in 30 seconds. Ricky's finger hovered over the detonator. He looked at the faces of his remaining team, seeing the same mix of fear and perseverance he felt. With a silent prayer, he pressed the button. The world exploded. The world shook as the charges detonated. Massive explosions ripped through the planet killer's superstructure, tearing apart the Nigean's ultimate weapon. Ricky and his team clung to whatever they could as the hangar deck bucked beneath them. Omega Force, get to the extraction point now! Admiral Garrett's voice crackled urgently through the comm. Ricky hauled himself up, scanning for threats through the smoke and debris. Move it, people! Go, go, go! They sprinted across the disintegrating hangar, dodging falling beams and leaping over fissures opening in the deck. A Federation assault shuttle swooped in, ramp already lowering. Ricky provided covering fire as his team scrambled aboard. We're clear, he shouted, diving into the shuttle as it rocketed away from the dying shipyard. Aboard the Dauntless, Ricky watched the planet killer break apart in a series of cataclysmic explosions. A ragged cheer went up from the bridge crew. Admiral Garrett's weathered face bore the ghost of a smile. Outstanding work, Colonel, but this is just the beginning. In the months that followed, Ricky found himself thrust into a new role. Omega Force became the tip of the spear for a growing coalition. Humans, rebel Nigians, and other alien races united against the tyranny of the Empire. On a sweltering jungle world, Ricky oversaw the training of new recruits. Sweat dripped from his brow as he demonstrated guerrilla tactics to a motley group of aliens and humans. Remember, he barked, speed and stealth are your allies. Hit hard, then melt away before they can respond. A gangly Nigian defector raised a three-fingered hand. But sir, what about their superior technology? Ricky's eyes hardened. Their arrogance is their weakness. We use that against them. Light years away, Supreme Chancellor Clax paced his opulent chambers on Zorus Prime. The Nigian leader's scales rippled with agitation as he absorbed the latest reports. Impossible, he hissed. How could these vermin destroy our planet killer? A shadowy figure materialized from the darkness. Lady Inquisitor Vranax, her psionic powers crackling around her, like awe-inspiring lightning. My lord, she purred, voice silk over steel. Allow me to root out this pestilence. My shadow troops will crush any resistance. Clax's eyes narrowed. Do it, show no mercy. On the fringes of Nigan space, Admiral Zora's cybernetically enhanced mind calculated probabilities at lightning speed. Her fleet danced through the void, striking at seemingly random targets. Status report, she demanded, her organic eye fixed on tactical displays. Shipyard Gamma 7 neutralized, her XO replied, but we lost the relentless to enemy action. Zora's cybernetic eye whirred as it focused. Acceptable losses. Prepare for our next strike. Deep in the bowels of the Dauntless, Lieutenant James Connors huddled in a corner, eyes wild. The horrors he'd witnessed on Tartarus played on endless loop in his mind. They're coming, he mumbled, rocking back and forth. The xenomorphs, they'll kill us all. Ricky crouched beside his former protege, concern etched on his face. Easy, Jim. You're safe now, but we need that intel. What did you see? Connor's eyes locked onto Ricky's, suddenly clear. A nightmare, sir, but I recorded everything. We have to stop them before it's too late. In the war room of the Dauntless, Admiral Garrett stood surrounded by holograms of alien allies. The debate had raged for hours. We cannot rush into this, insisted a tentacled diplomat. The Nigian defenses are too strong. Garrett's fist slammed onto the table. Every moment we hesitate, they grow stronger. We strike now, at the heart of their empire. A ripple of shock passed through the assembled leaders. Zorus Prime, asked an avian general, you would attack their homeworld? Garrett's eyes blazed with perseverance. It's time to end this war, once and for all. As the Coalition Armada prepared for the audacious assault, Ricky briefed Omega Force. His hardened commandos listened intently, checking weapons and armor. This is what we've been training for, Ricky said, his voice carrying to every corner of the briefing room. When those drop pods hit dirt, we'll be the first ones out. Our job is to clear the way for the main invasion force. A grizzled sergeant spoke up. Sir, what about Admiral Zora's fleet, or those shadow troops we've heard about? Ricky's mind focused. We'll deal with them when the time comes. For now, focus on your objectives. Any other questions? Silence fell over the room. Each commando knew the stakes. This would be the battle that decided the fate of humanity and countless other species. As the Dauntless and its allies surged toward Zorus Prime, Ricky strapped himself into a drop pod. The cramped space hummed with nervous energy as his team ran final equipment checks. 30 seconds to atmospheric entry, a computerized voice announced. Ricky closed his eyes, steadying his breathing. When he opened them, his gaze swept over his team. No words were necessary. They were ready. Prepare for drop in 5, 4, 3. The pod shuddered as it detached from the ship. Ricky's stomach lurched as they plummeted toward the Nigen capital. Through the tiny viewport, he saw hundreds of other pods streaking alongside them, carrying the hopes of the resistance. Alarms blared as anti-aircraft fire erupted from the surface. Ricky gritted his teeth as the pod jerked violently, dodging the worst of the barrage. The battle for Zorus Prime had begun. The pod slammed into the ground with bone-jarring force. Ricky's teeth rattled as the hatch blew open, revealing the chaos of Zorus Prime. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as Omega Force poured out of their drop pods, taking cover behind twisted wreckage. "Establish a perimeter," Ricky shouted, his voice barely audible over the din of battle. He tapped his comm unit. "This is Crawford, Omega Force's planetside, moving to secure LZ Alpha." Acknowledgements crackled through the static as Ricky led his team through the burning streets of the Nigen capital. Towering spires of alien architecture loomed overhead, their gleaming surfaces scarred by explosions and weapons fire. A massive figure emerged from the smoke, dwarfing even the largest of Ricky's commandos. Warlord Bazrax, his scaled hide glistening with bioluminescent patterns, hefted a crackling energy axe. "Puny humans," the Nigean veteran snarled, his voice a rumbling bass that Ricky felt in his chest. "Your assault ends here." Bazrax charged, his powerful legs propelling him forward with terrifying speed. Ricky's team scattered, pulse rifles spitting fire. The energy rounds seemed to simply annoy the hulking alien as he cleaved through a concrete barricade, sending shards of debris flying. "Sir, our weapons aren't—" The soldier's words were cut short as Bazrax's axe bisected him, the energy field cauterizing the wound instantly. Ricky gritted his teeth, watching his team's numbers dwindle. He knew their only chance was to take the fight to Bazrax directly. "Suppressing fire," he ordered, sprinting toward the Nigean warlord. Bazrax's reptilian eyes narrowed as Ricky closed the distance. The human was quick, ducking under a horizontal swing that would have decapitated him. Ricky drove his combat knife into a gap in Bazrax's armor, eliciting a roar of pain and rage. The two warriors grappled in the rubble-strewn street, a desperate dance of blade and claw. Ricky's enhanced reflexes allowed him to avoid the worst of Bazrax's attacks, but each blow that connected sent shockwaves of pain through his body. Blood, both red and an alien ichor, spattered the ground as they fought. Ricky could hear the labored breathing of his remaining squad, knew they were barely holding off the other Nigean forces converging on their position. With a burst of superhuman strength, Ricky managed to wrench the energy axe from Bazrax's grasp. The Nigean's eyes widened in surprise, then pain as Ricky buried the weapon in his chest. Bazrax fell to his knees, his massive form toppling like a felled tree. Ricky stood over his vanquished foe, chest heaving. He looked to his battered team, saw the renewed fire in their eyes. They had witnessed the impossible, their commander defeating a Nigean warlord in single combat. "Omega Force, regroup and push forward," Ricky ordered, retrieving his rifle. "We've got a long fight ahead of us." As they advanced deeper into the city, the comm channels erupted with frantic chatter, reports of ambushes, of officers being cut down by invisible assailants. Ricky's blood ran cold as he recognized the work of Inquisitor Vranax and her Psyker assassins. A garbled transmission cut through the noise. "This is Major Hawkins. We're pinned down in Sector 7. Need immediate evac?" The message dissolved into static and screams. Ricky's mind raced. Ryan Hawkins was one of their best. If he was in trouble... "Sir!" One of Ricky's lieutenants pointed to the sky. A massive Nigen battlecruiser loomed overhead, disgorging swarms of smaller craft. Admiral Zora had arrived. The battle for Zorus Prime had only just begun, and already the cost was proving higher than anyone had imagined. Anticipated, the Nigean counterattack slammed into the human forces with devastating fury. Plasma bolts seared the air as Ricky and his team fought desperately to hold their position. "Crawford, get your men out of there." Admiral Garrett's voice crackled through the comm, barely audible over the din of battle. "We're initiating a tactical withdrawal." Ricky gritted his teeth, watching as more drop pods were cut down before they could even land. "Roger that, Admiral. Omega Force, fall back to extraction point Delta." As they retreated through the burning streets of Zorus Prime, Ricky's mind raced. This was supposed to be their moment of triumph, the decisive blow against the Nigean Empire. Instead, it had become a bloodbath. Aboard the Dauntless, Admiral Garrett's weathered face was grim as he surveyed the tactical displays. Over half his fleet was gone, reduced to drifting debris or fiery atmospheric plunges. The Nigean defenses had proven far more formidable than their intelligence suggested. "All units, this is Dauntless Actual," Garrett broadcast. "Initiate emergency jump protocols. Rendezvous at coordinates Epsilon 9. As the battered remnants of the human armada limped away from Zorus Prime, Ricky stood in the Dauntless's medbay. The room was packed with the wounded and dying, the air thick with the metallic scent of blood and the acrid smell of burned flesh. "How bad?" he asked the chief medical officer, his voice hoarse from shouting orders. The doctor's eyes were hollow with fatigue. "We lost almost 80% of Omega Force, Colonel. I'm sorry." Ricky's fists clenched at his sides. He'd led those men and women into hell, and now most of them were gone. Weeks passed as the coalition regrouped at a hidden base deep in neutral space. Ricky found himself thrust into strategy sessions with Admiral Garrett and the remaining alien allies. The mood was somber as they assessed their losses and planned their next move. "The Nigean Empire is fracturing," a Keldaran intelligence officer reported, her feathers ruffling with agitation. "With Chancellor Clax dead, various warlords are vying for control." Garrett nodded grimly. "Which means we're facing multiple threats instead of one unified enemy." A commotion outside the war room drew their attention. A towering Nigean, his scales shimmering with bioluminescent patterns, was arguing with the guards. "Let him pass," Garrett ordered, recognizing the alien. The Nigean entered, bowing his head slightly. "I am Trakagar, once a general in Clax's army. I come offering my forces in service of your cause." Ricky's hand instinctively went to his sidearm, but Garrett waved him off. "And why should we trust you?" the Admiral asked, his voice level. Trakagar's eyes gleamed. "Because I have seen the atrocities committed by my own people. It is time for change." As the Alliance cautiously accepted Trakagar's aid, reports came flooding in from human colonies. Splinter fleets of Nigean warlords were launching harrying attacks, testing the coalition's defenses. Ricky found himself tasked with rebuilding Omega Force from the ground up. The new recruits were green, but hungry for revenge against the Nigeans. He pushed them harder than ever before, determined to forge them into an elite fighting unit once more. During a particularly grueling training exercise, a priority alert blared through the base. Ricky sprinted to the command center, arriving just as a familiar face appeared on the main view screen. "This is Admiral Zora of the Nigean Resurgence," the cybernetically enhanced alien declared. "Your victory was short-lived, humans. I now control the largest armada in the quadrant, and I will crush your pathetic rebellion once and for all." As the transmission cut off, silence fell over the command center. Garrett turned to face his officers, his expression grim but determined. "It seems our war is far from finished," he said quietly. "Prepare all available ships. We move out in 12 hours. Ricky nodded, already mentally preparing for the battles to come. As he left to brief his team, he caught a glimpse of an unfamiliar ship docking in the hangar bay. A colorful flag adorned its hull, the mark of the notorious mercenary Xavier Cragg. The coalition's next move was about to become far more complicated. The arrival of Xavier Cragg's mercenary ship marked a turning point. Within hours, the coalition's plans shifted from desperate defense to audacious offense. Admiral Garrett's voice rang out across the assembled fleet. "We strike at Calrathis, now." Ricky felt a surge of adrenaline as he boarded the dropship with his newly rebuilt Omega Force. The recruits were green, but their eyes burned with purpose. As they broke atmosphere, the void of space erupted into chaos. Coalition ships unleashed a blistering barrage on Calrathi's orbital defenses. Ricky's stomach lurched as their dropship weaved through the storm of plasma and debris. A nearby transport exploded in a silent fireball, and Ricky gripped his harness tighter. 30 seconds to touchdown, the pilot's voice crackled over the comm. The moment their boots hit sand, Omega Force sprang into action. Ricky led the charge across the dunes, pulse rifle chattering as he cut down the first wave of Nigene defenders. Xavier Craig's Corsair ships screamed overhead, their energy weapons carving fiery trenches through enemy positions. But the easy victories were short-lived. The ground beneath their feet began to tremble, and Ricky watched in horror as massive cybernetic monstrosities burst from hidden bunkers. Swarms of killer drones filled the air, their metallic buzzing drowning out the sounds of battle. "Fall back!" Ricky shouted, diving for cover as a nearby armored vehicle disintegrated under concentrated fire. "Regroup at Waypoint Charlie." The rebels found themselves steadily pushed back, despite their superior numbers. Ricky's mind raced, searching for a solution as he watched his forces falter. Then he saw it, a colossal structure rising from the sand, crackling with energy. "Sir!" A breathless lieutenant slid into cover beside him. "That's an ion cannon. If it comes online—" Ricky nodded grimly. "Then we take it out. Vargo team, on me." Leading a small group of his best operatives, Ricky fought his way toward the towering weapon. They breached the outer defenses, only to find themselves ambushed by sleek, cybernetic hunter-killers inside. The corridor became a killing ground. Pulse rifles flashed, illuminating chrome limbs and glowing red eyes. Ricky watched in horror as his team was cut down, until only Staff Sergeant Hendricks remained at his side. "Sir," Hendricks panted, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead, "we can still complete the mission." Ricky nodded, steeling himself. They fought their way to the reactor core, Hendricks's expertise guiding them through the alien systems. As alarms blared and enemy reinforcements closed in, Hendricks turned to Ricky with a look of grim persistence. "Get clear, sir. I'll finish this." Before Ricky could protest, Hendricks shoved him toward the exit and turned back to the reactor. Ricky sprinted through twisting corridors, the ground shaking beneath his feet. He burst out onto the sand just as a massive explosion rocked the entire structure. The ion cannon collapsed in on itself, clearing a path through the Nigean lines. Ricky allowed himself only a moment of grief for Hendricks before rallying the remaining Omegas. "Push forward! We end this now!" They fought their way toward Zora's command bunker, every step bought with blood and willpower. Reinforcements from Garrett's insertion teams joined them, and together they stormed the final defenses. Inside the bunker, they found Admiral Zora attempting to board her sleek corvette. The cybernetically enhanced Nigen snarled at Ricky, her eyes glowing with hatred. "Crawford," she spat, "you think this changes anything?" Ricky raised his rifle. "It's over, Zora. Surrender." For a moment it seemed she might comply. Then her hand darted to a device on her belt. Ricky's eyes widened as he recognized the detonator. "If I fall," Zora growled, "I'm taking you with me." The world exploded into white-hot agony. When Ricky's vision cleared, he found himself outside the smoldering ruins of the bunker. Medics swarmed around him, but his focus was on Admiral Garrett striding toward him. "You did it, Crawford," Garrett said, his voice a mix of pride and weariness. "But this war isn't over yet. We've dealt them a blow, but the Nigens are still out there." Ricky nodded, wincing as he stood. "What's our next move, sir?" Garrett's eyes hardened. "We take the fight to Zebulon Prime, and this time, we finish it." The Dauntless shuddered as another volley of plasma torpedoes slammed into its shields. Admiral Garrett steadied himself against the command console, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. Zebulon Prime loomed before them, a fortress world overflowing with defenses. "All ships, press the attack!" Garrett's voice carried across the comm channels. "We end this here and now." Ricky Crawford felt the familiar lurch in his stomach as the drop pod plummeted through Zebulon Prime's upper atmosphere. Around him, the men and women of Omega Force checked their gear one last time. They knew the odds. This was a one-way trip for most of them. The pod's hull glowed cherry red as it pierced the planet's defensive screen. Anti-aircraft fire erupted from the surface, filling the sky with deadly shrapnel. Ricky watched as several pods disintegrated mid-descent, their occupants vaporized in an instant. 30 seconds to impact, the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. Ricky gripped his pulse rifle tighter. Omega Force, you know the mission. We hit hard, we hit fast, and we don't stop until that command center falls. For Earth. The pod slammed into the ground with bone-jarring force. Its doors blew open, and Omega Force poured out into a maelstrom of laser fire and explosions. Nigerian mech infantry stomped forward, their augmented limbs whirring as they unleashed a hail of plasma bolts. Gamma Team, flank left, Ricky shouted, ducking behind a crashed gunship. Delta, suppress those mechs! The air filled with the staccato rhythm of pulse rifles and the deeper thump of grenade launchers. Ricky watched as his soldiers pushed forward, their faces grim with tenacity. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they fought with the desperation of those who knew failure meant extinction. A nearby explosion showered Ricky with debris. He looked up to see a massive cyborg enforcer looming over him, its arm-mounted cannon glowing with building energy. Ricky rolled, narrowly avoiding the searing blast that melted the ground where he'd been standing. In one fluid motion, he came up firing. His armor-piercing rounds punched through the cyborg's chest plate, rupturing its power core. The enforcer collapsed in a shower of sparks and hydraulic fluid. Sir, Lieutenant Varga's voice crackled in Ricky's earpiece. We've breached the outer perimeter, but we're taking heavy losses. Ricky surveyed the battlefield. Omega Force had carved a bloody path through the Nigerian defenses, but at a terrible cost. Bodies of human and alien alike littered the ground, and the air was thick with smoke and the scent of ozone. Push on to the command center, Ricky ordered. I'm taking a team to hit the shipyards. We need those demolition charges in place. As Ricky led his strike team through the labyrinthine corridors of the Zebulon Prime shipyards, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. Warning klaxons blared, and the air grew noticeably hotter. Crawford! Admiral Garrett's voice cut through the chaos. Our sensors are picking up massive energy spikes. The Nigerians are burning the atmosphere. Ricky cursed under his breath. Understood, Admiral. We're proceeding with the mission. They fought their way deeper into the shipyards, planting explosive charges at key structural points. The air grew thicker, harder to breathe. Ricky's team moved with grim efficiency, knowing that every second counted. As they placed the final charge, a hollow projection flickered to life. The scarred visage of Admiral Raku, cybernetic implants glowing with malevolent energy, filled the air. You think you've won, humans? Raku's voice dripped with contempt. I'll see this world burn before I surrender it to you. The projection vanished, replaced by a tactical display showing the location of Raku's command citadel. Ricky's expression resolute as he made his decision. Omega Fire Team, complete the demolition sequence, he ordered. I'm going after Raku. Ricky fought his way through the burning streets of Zebulon Prime's capital, the sky above him a hellish inferno. He linked up with the remnants of Varga's team, their numbers drastically reduced. We've got to push through, Ricky shouted over the roar of the flames. Everything we've fought for comes down to this. They stormed the command citadel, battling waves of cyborg assassins and the elite Black Guard. Ricky's armor was scorched and pitted, his body aching from a dozen wounds. But he pressed on, driven by the knowledge that humanity's fate hung in the balance. At last, they breached the inner sanctum. Admiral Raku stood before them, his cybernetic enhancements crackling with energy. The Nigerian's eyes burned with hatred as he faced Ricky. You've come far, human, Raku snarled, but your species will still burn. Raku lunged forward, his augmented strength sending Ricky flying across the room. Ricky hit the wall hard, his vision blurring. He struggled to his feet as Raku advanced, the Nigerian's arm morphing into a deadly energy blade. Time seemed to slow as Ricky reached for his sidearm. In one fluid motion, he raised the weapon and fired. The high-caliber round punched through Raku's skull, dropping the Nigerian admiral to the floor. With trembling hands, Ricky activated his comm unit. This is Crawford. Raku is down. Repeat, Raku is down. He fumbled for the detonator, his fingers slick with blood. As consciousness began to fade, Ricky pressed the button. In the distance, he heard the first explosions as the shipyards began to crumble. Aboard the Dauntless, Admiral Garrett watched as Zebulon Prime's orbital shipyards erupted in a series of cataclysmic explosions. The planet's defensive grid flickered and died, leaving the remaining Nigean ships adrift and vulnerable. All ships, this is Admiral Garrett, he broadcast. The Nigean command structure is neutralized. Push forward and mop up any remaining resistance. As the human fleet surged forward to claim their victory, Garrett's thoughts turned to the brave men and women who had made this moment possible. To Crawford and Omega Force, who had given everything in humanity's darkest hour. The war was over, but the true test was just beginning. Rebuilding a shattered galaxy would require all the strength and perseverance that had seen them through the long fight against the Nigeans. Garrett's eyes fixed on the distant stars, where countless human worlds awaited liberation. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, there was hope.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.